You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the program. So glad to have you here for this Thanksgiving weekend edition of the Marijuana Agenda. We'll be off tomorrow and Friday, and I'm so excited because the big rockin' Johnny B is coming to town. That's right, my dad, Johnny B, Byron Belville, is going to be right here at Delta 9 Studios, along with my mom, Jackie. They'll both be in here. And my brother Josh coming over. Yes, everybody's name starts with a J. It's J Days. It's like Sesame Street here. We're sponsored by the letter J. It's going to be a wonderful Thanksgiving. And today on the show, we're going to bring some of those vibes to the podcast. At the end of the program, I've got time for a little radical rant where I tell you what I'm thankful for, and that is you. You, the international drug war activist, the person fighting on the front lines as a volunteer, even no matter how little you're giving, you are giving for the freedom of others. And that's something to be thankful for. So we'll talk about that coming up at the end of the show. Also on the program today, we have time for our Police for Reform segment. And joining us today, we have Justin Boardman. He's a retired detective in the Special Victims Unit from Salt Lake City, Utah. So we're going to take a little bit of a left turn away from the drug war and talk about sex crimes and the war on sex trafficking. There are some parallels and some differences to talk about that, and Justin and I had a great conversation about that topic. Coming up in Police for Reform halfway through the show. Also on the program today, in What in the News? Oh my God. From the 2016 election, we had 5 states voting on marijuana legalization. 4 of them passed. The only one that didn't pass was in Arizona, where there was a pharmaceutical company that gave $500,000 to the campaign to defeat marijuana legalization. We've got some news about them. You'll hear about it in the cannabis headline news as well, but we'll expand on it just a little bit in What in the News to talk about this opioid manufacturer trying to cash in on the cannabis green rush. Yeah, there is no shame among those who fought marijuana prohibition to try to cash in on it after it becomes legal. That's happening in Canada as well. Let's get to the news, folks.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. The Canadian government has announced that it is seeking input on its proposal to legalize cannabis for all adults in 2018. In April 2017, the government introduced Bill C-45, the proposed Cannabis Act. Subject to the approval of Parliament, the Government of Canada intends to bring the proposed Cannabis Act into force no later than July 2018. Health Canada is seeking public feedback on the consultation paper called Proposed Approach to the Regulation of Cannabis. This approach builds on the extensive consultations already conducted by the Task Force on Cannabis Legalization and Regulation and Canada's existing system of regulated production of cannabis for medical purposes and industrial hemp. The deadline to provide written comments and responses to the questionnaire is January 20th, 2018. Downloads of the consultation paper and how to respond can be found online at canada.ca. The U.S. government has approved as a Schedule II drug an oral pharmaceutical containing Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive component of marijuana, manufactured by an opiate producer that donated $500,000 to defeat marijuana legalization in Arizona. The drug, Syndros, is manufactured by Phoenix-based Insys Therapeutics, manufacturers of the oral fentanyl spray Subsys. Recently, the founder and former CEO of Insys, John Kapoor, pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiracy to commit racketeering, mail mail fraud and wire fraud. 6 other Insys executives are also named in government allegations of bribing doctors to overprescribe the highly addictive fentanyl spray. In response to complaints that THC is legal when it is in profitable patented pharmaceuticals, DEA wrote, quote, FDA-approved products of oral solutions containing dronabinol have an approved medical use, whereas marijuana does not have an approved medical use and therefore remains in Schedule 1, end quote. The state of Virginia may open up its medical program to allow doctors to recommend CBD or THCA oil to patients for any condition. Statewide advocacy groups like Virginia RAMP, Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, and Virginia NORML, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, are beginning a campaign called #LetDoctorsDecide to promote a new medical marijuana bill for the January 2018 session, where at least 14 seats in the Assembly have flipped to the Democrats. Yesterday, final hearing at the Joint Commission on Healthcare included a vote in favor of such comprehensive legislation. 83% of Virginia Republicans and 97% of Virginia Democrats support medical marijuana. Virginia is one of the so-called CBD states allowing non-psychoactive cannabidiol only, but is unique in also allowing non-psychoactive THCA, the form THC takes before it is decarboxylated into psychoactive THC. After much confusion between state law enforcement agencies in Indiana, the Attorney General of the Hoosier State has deemed that CBD oil is, for all practical purposes, illegal. Attorney General Curtis Hill opined that only epileptic patients on the state registry created by a CBD oil law passed in April can possess the oil, but even they have no legal way to purchase or create the oil. Quote, simply put, cannabidiol is a Schedule I controlled substance because marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance, end quote, Hill said in his written advisory opinion. CBD advocates argued that a 2014 Indiana hemp law legalized CBD, but Hill rejected that logic, saying, quote, if it had, lawmakers wouldn't have drafted legislation that created an exception for epileptic patients, end quote. Hill has been outspoken in his stance against medical marijuana in op-eds, pointing out the dangers of addiction and impaired driving. He also said he would not be in support of lawmakers' attempt to legalize CBD oil. The appropriate channel for legalization, he said, is for the product to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Oral arguments began at the Philippine Supreme Court in a case that could determine the constitutionality of the nation's ongoing drug war massacres. Lawyers from the Free Legal Assistance Group petitioned that the raids where police enter the homes of suspected drug users without a warrant and then proceed to neutralize the individual is in violation of the Filipino Constitution. Flag lawyer Jose Manuel Dionco said, quote, that could be subject to misinterpretation by the policeman on the ground, saying that neutralize could be meant to mean kill. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. If you appreciate my full-time dedication to reporting and analyzing the news about cannabis, consider becoming a patron of the show. For just $4.20 per month, you'll help keep my live stream and podcast free while earning yourself your own private ad-free podcast link for the show, as well as links to the supporting articles and data. For a $9.99 VIP subscription, you'll get all that plus my exclusive research, data tables, and graphics. Just log on to mjaddenda.com and click the Become a Patron button today.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is high-purity THC content marijuana, and it's not a healthy substance.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com, City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical.
Really tough, really big, really great to infect and rot our nation from within.
Dangerous gateway drugs.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
To build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
In the news.
Today in What in the News, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Insys Therapeutics, this company in Arizona. Now, the latest news is they've been granted final approval from DEA in the rulemaking that their new drug, a drug called Syndros, it is a THC-based oral spray. It's synthetic THC, so it's dronabinol. But as far as the effect, dronabinol or THC is just THC. They're damn near, identical effect, right? So this oral preparation, dronabinol, in this preparation called Syndros, has been given designation as Schedule 2. Now, marijuana, as we know, has been given the designation Schedule 1. And there's three things that Schedule 1 designation means. No accepted medical use in the United States, high potential for abuse, and no way for it to be used safely under a doctor's supervision. Those are the three qualifying conditions for Schedule 1. And they say marijuana meets all three. Even though we know that's not true. We know there is 29 states. There are 29 states in the United States that have an accepted medical use for marijuana. But this Schedule 2 designation, the difference between Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 is simply this. It's medicine. That's it. Schedule 1 is an illegal drug. Schedule 2 is medicine. Now, Schedule 2 is still a dangerous drug. It's still a highly addictive drug. It's still a drug you need doctor supervision to use safely. But it is a medicine as far as they are concerned. Now, this is, of course, problematic. And we see it in all sorts of, heroin is Schedule 1, but morphine is Schedule 2, right? And what you find is that there's no rhyme nor reason to why drugs are in Schedule 1. Things like psychedelics, acid, magic mushrooms, ibogaine are in Schedule 1 as well. Even though these drugs are not shown to be addictive in any true sense of the word, nor toxic. So the Schedule 1 is really just the category for illegal drugs. Now, this Insys company comes along and makes a drug that is a synthetic THC. How does it get Schedule 2? How does something that is a dronabinol get a Schedule 2 versus marijuana get a Schedule 1? For the DEA and their point of view, it all breaks down to its potential for abuse. They don't think something that's an oral thing can be abused. And so what they're saying when they mean abuse, they mean smoked. That's really what we're getting down to. And really, if you dig deeper, it gets down to it's not standardized. It's not a standardized system. It doesn't come in a specific bottle. It doesn't have a specific amount of THC or a specific amount of CBD. All this afternoon, I've been going rounds with my local Oregon pot prohibitionist, the one who was kicked out of Project Sam for comparing legalization to mass shootings. And he's been echoing this just all day long. It doesn't have any trials behind it. It's not scientific. There's not a specific amount. When doctors recommend medical marijuana, they don't tell them an exact dosage to take. That's not medicine. And what that really comes down to for this Insys company, for these prohibitionists, for these people that hate medical marijuana, it's not the THC in it they hate. Obviously, they're cool with the THC if they can put it into Syndros, if they can put it into a pill like Marinol. They're fine with the THC, so it's not the THC that's bothering them. It's not the chemical constituency of cannabis that's bothering them. What's bothering them about cannabis, and what has always bothered them about cannabis, is its lack of standardization. Which is another way of saying we can't control it. We can't patent it. We can't barcode it. We can't put it in specific formulations. And most importantly, we can't stop you from growing it. That's what they hate about medical marijuana. And this, Syndros, being approved as a Schedule 2 drug, gives you a real good look at the fact that we're not talking about a war on drugs. We're talking about a war between drugs. We're talking about a war between the drugs that are owned and monopolized by pharmaceutical corporations backed by wealthy shareholders who don't like to see natural free competition eating into their portfolio. That's what this really has to do with, because you see in Insys Therapeutics, which The government's going after them right now for overprescribing and bribing doctors to recommend or to prescribe their fentanyl spray. Fentanyl, opioids. Here we are, all worried about THC in a plant, and they're overprescribing a fentanyl spray in the midst of an opioid epidemic that's claiming more lives per year than the Vietnam War. And this is the company that was telling, because this spray that they made, this opioid spray, only got approval from the DEA and FDA under the auspices of it being specifically for end-stage terminal cancer pain. That was it. All right, you got this really dangerous opioid Schedule II drug. We'll let you use it only for cancer patients in end-stage pain. And so what they do, they started bribing doctors to prescribe it for other uses, for continuing pain, for neuropathic pain, for whatever pain. And surprise, we ended up with an opioid epidemic. So 6 executives from Insys, as well as the former CEO and founder, John Kapoor, are currently going through all sorts of trials for which Insys already wrote this into their business plan, folks. There's documents showing that Insys Therapeutics already estimated, the most will be unhooked to the Justice Department for fines will probably be $150 million. Because that's what this is all about. They actually calculate, let's see, how many people could we get addicted and die and before they come up with a class action suit against us, and then the class action suit will cost X amount million of dollars, but we'll make Y million more if we go ahead and push the stuff. So yeah, let's do it. Hell, we had companies like Ford refusing to fix a 12-cent problem in the gas tank, leading to Pintos blowing up in the 70s. I mean, these corporations are sociopaths. It's not a moral judgment. It's just that's the way they're constructed. Their job is to make money every quarter at all costs, so long as those costs are legal. And they'll just go ahead and do that. Let's write that in. So you get a company like Insys, who's poisoning and killing the country with its fentanyl spray, leveraging every trick in the book they can, and now about to be found illegal tricks to make that happen. Meanwhile, they spend $500,000 to oppose marijuana legalization in Arizona. And they succeed. They managed to get marijuana to not be legal. They managed to maintain criminal penalties against healthy people who enjoy cannabis. And then in the very next breath are applying for a Schedule II designation on a dronabinol drug, the use of which would be severely curtailed if every adult could just grow and buy their own cannabis. The naked corruption of what goes on. And so, yeah, they spend their $500,000. Arizona doesn't become legal. What do you know? DEA grants them a Schedule II. Now, there's no proof of a quid pro quo there. There's no necessarily a causative situation going on there. But the juxtaposition of those facts and the timing of them does seem a little bit suspicious, doesn't it? They hate cannabis because they can't control cannabis. What they hate about it, what my prohibitionist here in Oregon hates, what every prohibitionist hates about this, is that it's not following the rules. It really comes down to a type of authoritarianism. Why? Medicines come in bottles, and they're prescribed by doctors who get their education about them in medical schools. And then the doctors give you a note to take to a pharmacist. And the pharmacist also went to a school to learn all about all of these different individual chemicals that we can control and monitor and measure in double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And these chemicals can be made consistently, replicated absolutely identically time after time after time by these huge factories that employ a lot of people. And there's people that own shares in those factories as well. And there's all sorts of international trade involved in the precursor chemicals to get them back and forth. That's what medicine is. Medicine can't be a person planting a plant in their backyard. Who knows what kind of plant it is, what strain it might be, how much THC, how much CBD it might have in it. We can't just have that happening. We can't have people then picking buds off that plant and drying them or pressing them or extracting the oils from them and then just using them, not being told how much to use or not knowing exactly what's in it. I mean, the madness. That's what it really is. Behind their skull, behind their eyes, that's what's going on in their brains. They can't wrap their minds around the idea. It's not the marijuana they hate. It's the fact that it shatters the existing medical paradigm, that it gets us out of being beholden to the men in the white coats, the men with the books, the men with the learning, the factories that produce this stuff. It gets it down to the point where you can take care of yourself with nothing but you and what your creator gave to you. Whether you think that was evolution that created or God that created it, you can take care of yourself, and that drives them crazy.
Come out and fight. It is a good day to die.
Ah, Chief Dan George. All right. That sound means it is 20 after the hour, 4:20 back in the state of my birth, Idaho. Happy 420 to my relatives and friends that are still trapped there in the only prohibition state in the West. When we return, we've got Police for Reform, Justin Boardman from the Salt Lake City Special Victims Unit to talk about sex crime. If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
There is nothing admirable, positive. There is nothing desirable about drugs.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana.
The International Cannabis Business Conference is headed to Hawaii. Get your tickets now for the year's best cannabis industry island retreat this December 1st through 3rd. Kauai Grand Hyatt hosts the 3-day ICBC, which begins with a VIP reception featuring cannabis comedian Doug Benson. The ICBC features exhibitor booths, keynote speeches, and informative panels with industry experts and regulatory officials. Then, when it's all said and done, kick back for the incredible after party with music by reggae legends Morgan Heritage. There's also a singles golf tournament you can play on Monday, sponsored by Leafly Endured Ventures. Log on to internationalcbc.com to get more information and buy your tickets now. Special discount hotel rates are in effect, so act fast. That's internationalcbc.com for the International Cannabis Business Conference. Aloha. Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
They said if I got drunk, I'd be one of the guys. They said if I got drunk, I'd be one of the guys. They lied. Find out the truth about drugs. Drugfreeworld.org.
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com. Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And let me be clear about marijuana. It is a potentially dangerous gateway drug that frequently leads to the use of harder drugs.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. If you're a cannabis brand looking to build trust and awareness within the community, consider becoming a sponsor of this program. Your message will be seen and heard by the most dedicated followers of marijuana policy reform, who are loyal and supportive of those brands that give back to the community. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button to learn how your brand can also be featured in my live nationwide appearances. Thank you for your support.
This is Police for Reform, brought to you by Law Enforcement Action Partnership at LEAP.cc. LEAP is a group of law enforcement professionals advocating for criminal justice reforms in the areas of drug prohibition, mass incarceration, asset forfeiture, community policing, and more. LEAP provides qualified speakers across the world to speak with authority on criminal justice issues. We visit with one such speaker now in Police for Reform.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Police for Reform, the podcast for Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I'm Russ Belville, and joining us today, we have Justin Boardman speaking to us. He's a former Special Victims Unit detective from Salt Lake City, Utah. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy you're here too, because we get to expand a bit on the mission of LEAP. When I first got involved in working with the people from LEAP, it was from the aspect of prohibition. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition was the original organization, and we were fighting to end the drug war. And
Absolutely.
Of course, the organization has now morphed and expanded a bit to become Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And that gives us the opportunity to discuss some other areas in which policing and our criminal justice system are in need of serious reforms. And boy, you couldn't have gotten a better guest to join us today on this topic, because it seems like the topic of sex is all throughout the headlines today for all the wrong reasons, between assault, harassment, rape allegations, and so on. So, Justin, I wanted to talk to you about this because it seems to me, from my perspective as someone who's fought in the arena of legalizing marijuana, it just seems to me that people have natural human desires. One of them is to get high. Another one is to have sex. And it seems to me that in both instances, when we try to criminalize the commercial activity in it, we just get more problems than we could possibly handle. Are you on that same idea that the prohibition of sex activities, sex work, is causing more harm than good?
Wow. So that is a loaded question. As far as legalizing sex work, that's such a hard thing to comment about.
Is it too broad a question? Should we narrow down, drill down maybe?
I think, yeah, maybe a little bit. There's so many factors that come with prostitution, and certainly going out and enforcing prostitution laws and stuff, there are some problems with that, and it's mainly the services, and we tend to go after the person who is selling sex, and not going after the root cause. And
Yes.
That's certainly wrong. And if we could figure out a way to get those people more services so that they could leave this lifestyle if they so desired.
Mm-hmm. And I think one critical difference we should make sure we emphasize is that when we're talking about drugs, it's a commodity. When we're talking about prostitution, it's a human being. There's a lot of problems that we see in trafficking, in the violence that's inherent in the criminalized system. And then some people will point to places like Germany or Amsterdam, where they have a red light district, and it seems to have alleviated some of the problems. Nevada, exactly. So is that the direction America should be heading? What are some of your suggestions as far as dealing with these issues?
Me personally, wow. Once again, we're dealing with human beings, and that makes it a whole lot more difficult, and we need a whole lot more research than what we have. And I don't know particularly the stats when it comes to, say, like Amsterdam or Germany or even Switzerland. Switzerland has legalized prostitution as well. So I don't know what the violent stats would be. Certainly there would be trafficking runs rapid. in that area. So trying to figure out the social ends of that, I think, would be the biggest hurdles. When it comes to legalization of marijuana, which is something that I'm not terribly all that familiar with, but as a cop on the road, I didn't want to waste my time. But when it comes to human beings are worth our time. And, if it's consensual and people enjoy what they're doing when it comes to sex, and the transactions are fair and, it's adult. And I don't think we should be interfering as much in that. However, if you have people that are forced into and being trafficked and their freedom is gone and they're paying back debts with their bodies, then I do believe that we need to be there.
Yeah, that's the dilemma that we have in this, is that there are some people involved in sex work who are there, and it's an above board situation. They are consenting. They know what they're doing. They are perfectly willing to be involved in it. And then there's the other side where it's people who have been abused and victimized and forced into these sex acts that they don't necessarily wish to be in that profession necessarily. So I guess where I'm going with this is, how do we get more of the former and less of the latter?
I think there's some models out there in the world when it comes to legalized prostitution where, say, they might have a brothel and they rent out their rooms to the worker, if you will, per day. But also what comes along with that, for the house of prostitution, if you will, is you would also have a social worker there as well for the workers to help them if they needed help or wanted to leave that particular very lucrative business, so I've heard, and try something else, or get help with a substance abuse problem, or help with their trauma backgrounds, or things like that. That's not a terrible model, in my view.
Now, Justin, in your time working as a special victims unit detective, I'm interested in the intersection between the illicit drugs market and the illicit sex market. In that, did you ever deal with a case where there was no drugs involved at all in a sex case? Is there a correlation between the two?
It depends on what you would classify alcohol as.
Yes. Well, it's a drug as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, then if it's a drug as far as you're concerned, alcohol-facilitated sexual assault is huge. And it is used as a weapon, and not just in a way that, I use alcohol. And I do it, and it takes down some of my social boundaries and things like that. And, when we date in our society, we may drink a few drinks to do that, to loosen up a little bit. And that's fine. When you take that a step further and use it to rape somebody or get them to the point of not being able to consent with a sound mind, then alcohol-facilitated sexual assault is huge.
Yeah, and of course we hear that in the allegations against Bill Cosby, where he was drugging people's drinks. We hear it in the allegations against Roy Moore, where he was supposedly getting wine for teenagers. Alcohol has long been a part of what we have seen in sexual assaults, date rapes, all of these sex crimes. Not so much the marijuana then?
Not so much the marijuana, no. I
just had to get that in
often, there. I absolutely. And in reading the reports, so when a individual is raped and reports fairly soon, usually between 0 and 5 days, sexual assault is a late report type of crime for a lot of different reasons. They usually report a week, 3 months, 10 years down the line. That happens.
Like we're seeing with the Roy Moore case for 40 years, 30 years down the line.
Absolutely. That is normal. Our society may not.
So when we hear these people on talk radio and the TV cable news shows saying, "Oh, what are these women doing waiting 40? It's been 40 years. There's something fishy going on." That's not abnormal, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And so back a little bit, where you asked me a question about marijuana and sexual assault. And,
yes.
In reviewing these reports, when someone goes in and has an exam done, a sexual assault exam done, they will talk about the substances that were used during their date. And sometimes, marijuana would pop up, and sometimes methamphetamine or heroin, that sort of thing. But just so that when we did a blood test or tested the blood, we would know it was there. But most of the time, it was alcohol. And as far as being the weapon used, marijuana may have been used and passed around at the party or the function, if you will, but we couldn't say, anytime I could never say they used marijuana as the weapon in this sexual assault.
We got the victim so stoned that she gave in or was incapacitated.
Right. No, I didn't have those kind of cases. And in my time in the Special Victims Unit, I added up. It was approximately 1,300 cases I investigated in the 7 years.
Wow, that's
lots.
Stunning and tragic in a lot of ways. We're glad you were there to investigate those cases. But how many cases go unreported out there?
Holy moly! You really honestly don't know it's not reported because it's not reported. But the estimates are about 20% of sexual assault may be reported. And that has a lot to be with our social thoughts about it. The person, usually they won't disclose to law enforcement right away or walk into a hospital. They'll usually tell a friend, family member who has not been trained in these type of interactions or educated in their upbringing, and they'll go straight to, how much did you have to drink? What were you wearing? Those sort of things, which applies a lot of guilt right onto the victim right then, and they may not report. So that is an issue and a problem.
Yeah, and now that we're seeing so much of this news, and I know you're not with the SVU anymore, and it's awfully soon to tell, but do you think with all this revelation with Harvey Weinstein and Louis C.K. and all these people, all this sexual harassment allegations that seem to be pouring out day after day after day, do you think this will lead to an increase in the reporting and perhaps a decrease in the events?
I would hope so. What you're seeing right now, I think, in the media is a tiny scratch to the surface of the problem. It's a tiny little scratch of what is out there and what does not make it to police departments and to reportings. There's a lot of brave individuals that are coming forward right now and reporting their sexual assault and or harassment or, whatever the offense may be. There's so much underneath that it will crush the systems. We're already being crushed as it is. But as people report, yes, more reports do come in. And depending on the campaigns, the public campaigns, maybe like End Violence Against Women International has a Start by Believing program out there. And when you start putting that into your community, your reporting goes up. And
strength in numbers, I'd suppose.
Huge numbers.
Yeah.
I know in Salt Lake County, there for a few years, we were having 30% increases on top of 30% increases for 3 or 4 years with the same systems. Yeah.
Now, Justin, is there any significant prevalence of false reporting of these crimes?
That's a good question. False reporting gets a whole lot more press, if you will. False reporting happens. However, it is not in the types of numbers that culturally we think they may be. If you look at all the attention that the people that are reporting right now are getting, it's a negative thing to the poor survivors. So it's not something that we see a lot. In my 1,300, I prosecuted 2. If you check out the FBI numbers, and there's been lots of studies that have happened, they have false reporting between a 2 and an 8%. And it is the same as false burglary charges or traffic accidents for insurance fraud.
Really?
That's right in line.
So there's no greater prevalence in false sex crime reporting than any other crime reporting?
Just in the media.
Wow.
Right. Now, that's not to say that these cases are very hard to prove in court. So there's a bigger area of gray where we can't prosecute and go forward with, but it doesn't mean that they're false. It just means that they were not being able to be, the probable cause, if you will, was not able to be met. It doesn't mean it didn't happen and could be proved civilly or that, but the burden of proof wasn't met. So there's a lot of those gray areas, and that's what I'm out trying to change.
All right. What can we do as just citizens out here to aid in this situation, aid in reporting, protect ourselves from false reports? Do you have any advice for us?
Just educate yourself. Get on YouTube. Get on the internet. Be careful what you search for when you put in sex. But when you do a little search, take a look at that. Go to some of the your local sexual assault coalition and see what kind of media and information they have. That would be the best way. And as far as police work, this is a huge portion of justice reform. This is a big deal, sexual assault investigations. Recently, Senator Al Franken from Minnesota had a press conference in his state locally, wanting to do trauma-informed victim interviewing for all victims of sexual assault, specifically adults. There's already that in the system for children, and treating these cases more seriously. Also, what happens is, as officers, we are not trained properly when it comes to the neurobiology of trauma, whether it's sexual assault or whether it's trauma in our own lives or trauma on the job. We train for trauma. We do muscle memory when it comes to our butt belts and our guns when the crap hits the fan, so to speak. But our brains work in a specific way that we have been trained. We've been training it, but didn't understand it. And really quickly, what I mean by that is, we go out and we have interactions with people in society that may not be the most upstanding, and they lie to us. Believe it or not, people lie to the popo, and we catch them in lies because they can't get their story straight. But victims of sexual assault or victims of violence, so it doesn't even have to be sexual assault, will tell us stories in the same way our suspects have been when they're lying to us, and we just assume that they were lying.
But they're reacting to trauma.
they're reacting to trauma, and that's not in our background as far as education is concerned, not in the police academy, that sort of thing.
That's fascinating. It's something I'd never considered. And another consideration I might have you address is what shortcomings are happening within police departments, aside from that one, as far as believing the accusers. Is there a problem with filing these in a timely manner, rape kit testing, any other subjects we could cover?
Oh, man, you're hitting on a lot. As far as police reform, the special victims units or the officers investigating these crimes need the subsequent training. We haven't had it. And in the victimology side, we get suspectology all the time, but we don't get the victimology. And that's where the proof is. That's when you get this aha moment is, holy crap, she's not lying to me. And we don't go to work every day to do a bad job. We go to work every day to do a good job. And when this clicks on officers, when they understand it, they pay more attention to their cases because they care about them, because they go, holy moly, yeah, she is a victim of this crime. And we do our best as a society of police officers, the best that we can. And so we start investigating these cases in a more detailed and a better manner, gathering the evidence. But what that happens to that is these cases take longer. They're not sprints, they're marathons. And administration has a harder time. They want you to burn and turn through cases faster because, well, across the nation, our numbers are down. We're doing more with less officers.
And to tie this back to the world I come from, a lot easier to bust 5 potheads in the park than to spend a long time on a rape case.
Absolutely, especially if you believe that 90% of them are false, which is just the opposite. It's in single digits for false reporting. Wow. So, yes, we should be concentrating on these cases much more than the others. These have so much trauma. We have traumatized our victims so long that, yeah, they're turning to different ways to treat their trauma, substance abuse, all sorts of different things.
Wow.
So,
Justin, it's an amazing topic, and I wish I had a lot more time to discuss it. We'll get you back on the show again sometime to get into more depth on this, but we're going to have to wrap things up for now. But I appreciate you joining us. And before we sign off, remind everyone, Law Enforcement Action Partnership has speakers all across the country and around the world. Visit leap.cc, and you can find more. And Justin, any other links you'd like to let people know about?
Certainly that one. That's the one right now. There are different conferences and different websites for sexual assault. It's an easy Google search, and I'll let you go with that.
All right. Thank you, Justin Boardman, so much for your service and for joining us here on the Marijuana Agenda.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by Cannabis Kamikaze, a professional licensed producer from Canada producing 3 pounds per light. Follow Cannabis Kamikaze on Twitter at Cannabis Kamikaze. That's at Cannabis, Kamikaze. Cannabis Kamikaze.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. Lot safer. After 5 years of legal marijuana in Colorado and Washington, both states have shown no increase in teen use of marijuana and decreases in marijuana DUI arrests, while generating tens of thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions in tax revenue. Legalization is no longer theory. It's a proven public policy benefit. Tell your elected officials it's time to end adult marijuana prohibition.
Health Cannabinoid, your ACMPR experts. Consultation services for medical cannabis. Visit healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. That's www.healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. Health Cannabinoid.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am here. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Well, here we are on the eve of Thanksgiving here in the United States. I know my friends in Canada celebrated last month, but today we're just going to take this short period of time at the end of our podcast to talk about what I'm thankful for, and that is you. I am thankful to you for being a cannabis activist. And even if you're just someone who just listens to this podcast from time to time, you're a cannabis activist because you're getting yourself educated about the true facts regarding this amazing plant. You're learning about public policy. You're learning about the way our government works, the way our capitalism works. You're learning how the drug war infiltrates so many areas of our civil liberties. You're learning how the war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs is poisoning so many of the issues in this country. By doing that, you are a cannabis activist because you can't help but spread that knowledge to the next person you talk to, the next tweet you share, the next Facebook post you write. That knowledge is going to seep out of you and it's going to start infecting other people. So I'm thankful to you, the listeners, the viewers, for being cannabis activists. And I'm especially thankful to those cannabis activists who take it up a notch. Those volunteers who form normal chapters or work with SSDP or work in their own NGOs around the world trying to do the same thing, trying to spread the knowledge, spread the information, change the laws, grow the acceptance, shape public opinion to make the change we need to see happen. I'm thankful for my friends Myrtle Clark and Jules Stobbs down there in South Africa, the Dacha couple who are fighting there. They're arguing in front of their constitutional court right now. Well, maybe not right now. It's the other side of the planet. But they're arguing in front of the constitutional court there in South Africa to recognize a personal right to cultivate and use cannabis in that country. And they do this as volunteers. They do this as people who I am sure suffer a lot of attacks online, have all sorts of haters, all sorts of difficulties, and of course the ever-present threat of law enforcement hanging over your head. I think a lot of people don't recognize enough the trials and tribulations, sometimes literal trials, that we cannabis activists go through, not seeking riches or fame or fortune, but because we know this is right. And if we don't stand up for it, who's going to stand up for it? I think of Greg DeHote in Birmingham, or in London, England, who's fighting there with the UK Cannabis Social Clubs, and Deej Sullivan and Jeanette and a bunch of other people out there in England that are fighting for this. So they're just a decade or two behind us on the curve. I think of wonderful activists like Mark and Jody Emery or Kirk Tusaw, Dana Larson up there in Canada. where they're poised to get legalization, but are watching in horror as the federal government transforms what is supposed to be a small, tight-knit closet kind of industry into this monstrosity that's corrupt and starting to, give the licenses away to the best connected people. I think of activists all around this country, like Sean McAllister in Dallas, DFW Normal, and Aaron Gutknecht, and Barbara Humphreys, and so many great people down there in Texas who have turned that state into a cannabis hotbed. They are actually naming a cannabis production facility after one of their Texas state representatives. They're producing cannabis for their CBD oil program in Texas. They're actually growing cannabis in Texas for medical purposes. And that wouldn't have been possible. That great activists on the north side of the state, Dallas, you got the Waco area, you got guys like Cliff Duvall, you've got the folks in Houston, the folks at Texas Normal and Austin, all around that state. I'm so thankful that they're taking it on. And they get the hate, they get haters, they get all sorts of problems too for volunteer work. Think of people in Missouri like Dan Vietz, who's working out there, and others that I've met in Missouri. And so many names I'm going to forget as I try to do this rant, but some of those Missouri activists fighting to get this change. Michigan, Matt Abel and the crew up there with Michigan Normal that are going to get legalization on the ballot this time in 2018. When Michigan passes, oh my gosh, legal marijuana. And I'm just excited to think, for a state that's got places like Detroit, Michigan, which has just been so devastated by the loss of their industrial base, places like Flint, Michigan, where they're, still drinking poisoned water out there, that we can get a cannabis industry happening and get some jobs and some revitalization into that country. Imagine the tourism from the pot tourism coming from Canada into Detroit to pick up weed. I mean, what could be happening in Michigan with legalization could be amazing. I think of the East Coast activists like in Virginia, Pam Novy and Jen Michelle Padini working there with Virginia Normal, Jess Vegas and the Shirts Without a Purpose people that are working. In D.C., Adam Eidinger and the guys with the D.C. marijuana that got legalization to happen are still pushing. And cross our fingers, the most recent budget appropriations for D.C. have not included the language that prevents them from having legal shops. If it stays that way, we might get legalization, real store marijuana happening in Washington, D.C. soon. You got Chris Goldstein and Derek Rosenzweig out there in New Jersey and in the Philly area working. N.A. Poe. I'm so thankful for those guys all working so hard. And for 8 years having to deal with the governor, Chris Christie, and not pulling your hair out. That's just amazing. We go to the South. You go Rebecca Forbes down there in North Carolina. You got Sharon Ravert and Dean Sines and Kelly Hammock and Tom. I forget the rest of the names. The new executive director down there. But folks down there in the South were like nobody thought it would be possible. But now they look down in Florida, where my friend Bobby Platshorn is down there, and Karen Sieb Goldstein. Working hard to make changes. Kathy Jordan, who fought for so long to be the face of medical marijuana down there, and they finally have it now. Change is happening all over this country. I think of the activists back in my home state of Idaho, people who oftentimes are living outside of Idaho, just over the border, because it's so terrifying. They are so draconian and so willing to go after activists in Idaho that most of the activists have had to leave the state and fight from over the border to try to change things there. And of course, we can't talk about activism and thanks and giving thanks without thinking of all the people in Washington, Oregon, California, and Colorado who got the ball rolling in the first place. People that I've come up in this movement with, people that I've known for almost a dozen years, like an Anthony Johnson and people like Allison Holcomb in Washington State, Rick Steves, who helped out a lot, Dale Sky Jones, Richard Lee down in California. And of course, all of these things are, just huge. All these people are just such huge parts of the legalization movement, and I'm so thankful for all of them. Especially thankful to our buddy Bobby Platshorn. It's his birthday today. Bobby, Black Tuna Gang, one of America's longest-serving nonviolent marijuana prisoners, and now he gets to live in Florida in West Palm and enjoy medical marijuana that he had fought so hard for and had done 30 years of time for. So this Thanksgiving, I hope you're thinking of those who came before us, those who fight alongside of us, and those activists yet to come, because this battle is a long way from being over. We got to get it legal in every state, in every country, and then we got to start chipping away and removing these ridiculous restrictions and limits and make this plant as free as possible. And when we've got it as free as possible, time to move on to other plants, other substances, other actions. Take this activism forever.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.